Welcome to a sunny morning here in central London, Westminster to be precise, and right behind me is the House of Commons, where last night British Prime Minister Theresa May got her orders from Parliament. The House of Commons voted on several amendments which would give some indication of what the feeling was in the House of Commons as to where Brexit would go. So May's been told that she now needs to go back to Brussels and to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement that she'd already negotiated with Brussels. That agreement was rejected a few weeks ago, and MPs are saying you need to go back, get some new details for it, particularly related to Ireland and Northern Ireland and the land border between those two places, which is the only land border between the UK and the European Union once Brexit happens. This has been a stumbling block for the past few months and may yet still be. Behind me you can see a lot of flags. We've got protesters around the corner waving flags. There's EU flags here, there are British flags here, and just over here there's a Welsh flag, and then we've got a Scottish flag. In the background, whilst we're doing the interview, you may be able to hear people shouting various different slogans. We've got pro-Brexiteers, we've got Leavers, we've got Remainers. The argument continues in public, within the newspapers, within the media, and within Parliament. And at the moment, there's no clear sign where Brexit will end. It could be a no deal with Britain leaving on March the 29th, which is the formal date for leaving. It could be that that's extended. It could be that there is the agreement that May's already agreed, which does get through the House of Commons again, even though it's been rejected once. It could be the modification of May's withdrawal agreement, or it could be, perhaps, this seems unlikely, that there might be a general election or a second referendum. All these things are possible, and this state of uncertainty is one of the things that's adding to some of the difficulties around reaching an agreement. So I've got with me here today to join us Dr. Alan Wager, who's a fellow at independent think tank at King's College here in London called UK in a Changing Europe, which has been examining the Brexit process since the Brexit referendum vote on June 23rd, 2016. So that's 2.5 years ago. So, Alan, it's 2.5 years back where we had this vote. We're still uncertain with about 60 days left to March the 29th, which is the formal date for Britain leaving the European Union, but even that might not happen. Just run us through what happened last night in the House of Commons and why that is significant.
So last night the Commons decided on two things. They decided they don't really want no deal, but there's not really any way they can stop no deal. They decided to not do anything to stop no deal, but they decided they don't want no deal with the European Union. And they've also said they want Theresa May and the Prime Minister to change this backstop, this border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. They want to change the current arrangements that have been agreed with the European Union. They say that they leave Britain tied too closely to the European Union and following its rules. And a lot of Conservative MPs in Theresa May's party, in the governing party, the Conservatives, are saying that they want to change the agreement that the UK and the EU have created. They want to make it so the UK is less bound to EU rules. And that's what Theresa May agreed to last night. She managed to create a majority in the House of Commons to say she's going to go back and try and renegotiate something to do with this Northern Irish issue.
So she's renegotiating a withdrawal agreement that she's already negotiated with Brussels. What's Brussels' viewpoint on that?
Brussels is very reluctant to reopen the agreement they've already made with the European Union. And last night, immediately after the vote, they came out and said publicly, we don't want to reopen this question. Nothing has changed, and we don't want to renegotiate this backstop issue, this Northern Irish border. So it looks like, although she's now got a majority in Parliament, which is one thing that she was lacking a couple of weeks ago, she now needs to go back to the European Union in those negotiations, and she's going to find it very difficult to get a compromise that will be supported by the European Union and by her own MPs.
So while she's managed to achieve something with the Parliament here and get some agreement that unites around going back and renegotiating, it's going to be quite difficult for her to persuade the European Union to change their mind.
Yeah, what her MPs want is something that means that there's no that the EU and the UK aren't locked into this agreement on the Northern Irish border indefinitely. They want some way of saying, so at some point the UK can say, we've had enough, we want to move away from this agreement. And currently the rules say that the UK would be locked into that agreement. And that's because it provides a sort of insurance guarantee that should the UK decide that it doesn't want it anymore, that the EU can bind them into that. And that's what the EU are really reluctant to give away. But something's going to have to give. Either the EU or the UK government are going to have to give on this point. Someone's going to have to win on this.
So let's have a look at the Northern Ireland border and the Irish border and why it's so important. This is something to do with what's called the Good Friday Agreement. That's about 20 years ago now, 1998, isn't it? What was that all about, and how is that significant here? I mean, this is an international treaty, isn't it? Signed between Britain and Ireland. What are the significance of that?
And the Good Friday Agreement was also an international treaty between Ireland and the UK. And it sort of guaranteed that on the island of Ireland, there would be no border between this Northern Ireland at the top and the rest of Ireland, because some people in Northern Ireland see themselves as part of the Southern Ireland. So having no border was the way of sort of squaring the circle, if you like, and saying to everyone on the island of Ireland, you're part of the same country. And that becomes more difficult as a result of Brexit. And that was what the Good Friday Agreement was based on. And it's really, really hard. It's sort of a logical conundrum more than anything else. How do you keep this Good Friday Agreement, which was rested on an open border between the two countries, and also have Brexit, which inevitably means you're going to have some barriers to trade and to movement between Ireland and Northern Ireland, and between the UK and Ireland in that sense.
And that's because if Brexit goes ahead, the rules on the British side of the border will inevitably be different, even if only slightly different, than those on the European Union side of the border. That's not a problem now, is it?
Yeah, because part of the UK decision to leave and part of the argument to leave the European Union was so that the UK could make big new trade deals, for example, with, I don't know, America, you know, or yeah, and India, for example, is seen as someone that they could make a really quick trade agreement with, for example. But the difficulty is if the UK agrees to these rules, the people, the Brexiteers, the pro-Brexit MPs say they wouldn't be able to make these trade deals. So this goes to the heart of why people voted, whether they voted to have these free trade deals with the rest of the European Union, with the rest of the world, and whether or not the EU is stopping that from happening. So this is actually sort of for a lot of MPs, particularly, this is something that particularly troubles MPs. This is something that could stop them from passing any agreement that Theresa May can agree to with the European Union.
And so for Britain leaving the European Union, the vote back in June 2016 said leave, but it didn't give specifics about leaving. Yes. And you've identified this kind of stumbling block of the Northern Irish border, which seems to be the thing that's stopping the agreement that has been reached between May and the European Union from getting through Parliament here. How would you say, or what chances would you rate May of having success at persuading the European Union to move from its current position?
Well, you know, Theresa May does have some things on her side. If there was a no-deal Brexit, that would be damaging for the European Union as well as for the UK, and no one wants there to be no deal. And what we found in Parliament last night was, although people don't want no deal, they also don't want to stop Brexit from happening. The MPs were given the opportunity to take power away from Theresa May, and Theresa May still has those powers to carry through Brexit should there be no deal, because MPs are really reluctant to stop Brexit from happening. And it seems that there's definitely a majority in Parliament to make sure that this Brexit process can reach a conclusion. It looks unlikely that, as of last night, it looks unlikely there would be any majority for trying to reverse the process. So Theresa May has that on her side in that sense.
So in a way, we don't really know quite where it's going to end. So that's much the same as it was beforehand. Has anything been achieved by what happened last night?
I think there is some clarity. I mean, Theresa May got a lot of what she wanted. She wanted to show the European Union that if they move on what they have seen as their red lines on the Northern Irish border, she can get a majority for her deal through the House of Commons. And in a way, she proved that last night. There was a majority in the House of Commons for her position, and the Conservative Party united around Theresa May in that position. So it was a very good day for the Prime Minister. It showed that if she can get something from these negotiations, she can command a majority in the House of Commons to translate that into law. So it was a very positive day for Number 10, for the Prime Minister and for the government last night.
Well, let's take a quick look at some of the newspapers which came out this morning and see what they've got to say about Brexit. So first up here we have the Metro newspaper. This is the free newspaper that's given away. Let me get this for you. There you go. This is the free newspaper that's given away. It's the largest circulation newspaper in Britain at the moment. It's given away on public transport. And that rather weak pun is actually a very good headline, because that does tell you exactly what the situation is. It's over to you, over to EU. We've talked about the EU and what they are likely to say. Down here, Metro's giving its opinion. It's saying MPs support key vote to send May back to Brussels. And then it says, but Tusk insists Brexit agreement can't be revisited. Now, what does that mean? Tusk says Brexit agreement can't be revisited.
So Donald Tusk is a really powerful member of the European Union. He's the sort of president of the So he is very insistent that nothing can be changed from this deal. The difficulty is that the power then might translate to the heads of state of the various members of the European Union, and that's what the government hopes, is that they can almost go over the head of Donald Tusk and start talking to Angela Merkel in Germany and Emmanuel Macron in France, and try to forge an agreement with the heads of state to try and get over this issue, because it looks like the key sort of figures in the European Union, the sort of Jean-Claude Juncker is the head of the Commission, and Donald Tusk is head of the Council of the European Union, are very insistent that this deal can't be revisited, and that's what all the EU negotiators are saying, that there's no way we're going to do anything for the UK. So it looks like we're at an impasse there. But what Theresa May hopes is that once it gets down once the clock continues to tick down towards the end of March, that they can forge an agreement and try and get some consensus among the heads of state in the European Union.
Let's take a look at another paper. This is the Times, which always bills itself as the paper of record in Britain. So it tends to be an establishment newspaper. And here it's saying May unites Tories behind fresh talks with Brussels. And it's got a picture of her smiling on the front. That's a bit unusual. She's not had a lot to smile about. Like you said, it was a good day for her yesterday. But that depends on what she can deliver from Brussels over the next couple of days, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's a really positive headline for Theresa May. And the Times have been sort of toying with the idea of maybe there should be another referendum, and what the Times are saying today is it doesn't look like that's possible. MPs should unite behind May's deal as the only alternative to no deal, which they say they want. And I think what a lot of people are saying is that last night the possibility of a different deal or a delay of Brexit or a reversal of Brexit are almost off the table now. So this was why it was said positive for Theresa May, is that now she hopes she can then come back in a couple of weeks' time when there'll be the vote on her deal again. So we'll come back here again in a couple of weeks' time. She'll be able to say to her MPs, it's this deal, my deal, or no deal. So that's the hope, and that's why she was pretty happy last night.
One more to look at, and this is the Financial Times. So this is the paper that deals with the city. It's really an international paper. This is the UK edition. There'll be a Europe one, and I think there may be another one for America. The headline here is May's move to rewrite Brexit deal sets collision course with Brussels. The FT is more of an internationalist newspaper and is the kind of media outlet that would back something like a second referendum or what's called a soft Brexit. What do you make of that headline, Alan? And run us through what a soft Brexit might be.
So they're more critical of what Theresa May has managed to achieve, because they think once she gets back to the European Union, once it enters talks with the EU 27, that it will sort of dissolve on impact, this this consensus in Britain. But yeah, so the Financial Times are hopeful that once that sort of settles down, then you'll end up with a deal that can unite the whole of the House of Commons and Labour MPs. So what Theresa May managed to do last night was to get a majority for a sort of harder version of Brexit. They still think they're still quite cynical on whether that can last to the end of the Brexit process, and they still think the only way she could actually get a deal that can last and can pass the House of Commons is by including the opposition party. So there's some disagreement between the Times, who thinks that this has been a successful night for Theresa May, and the Financial Times, with a more European perspective potentially, who are saying that ultimately this is maybe a short-term win, and in the bigger picture she'll still need to change tack to get her deal through.
And so you're talking there about there being a possible chance of a no deal. If there was a no deal, could that happen on March the 29th, and what might the consequences of a no deal be? Or do we even know what the consequences of a no deal would be?
No deal is more likely today than it was yesterday, because MPs were given the option to take power away from Theresa May and trying to stop no deal, and they didn't do that. And Theresa May still has that in her pocket, and it looks like some members of her party could be in favour of what they call a managed no deal. So sort of you have small amounts of agreements with the European Union, no big deals. So maybe May's deal doesn't last, but Theresa May stays in power and has a sort of smaller deal with the European Union, a sort of side deal, sort of state-by-state sort of deal.
A state-by-state deal, so she would make a bilateral deal with Germany.
Yeah, but that will be difficult, because if the talks do break down with Theresa May and the other EU countries, there might be some bad and some ill will there if that happens. So the first course of action for Theresa May, and the plan A throughout, has been to get a deal with the European Union. Increasingly, however, though, members of her party are increasingly coming around to the idea that maybe you could have a no deal, and maybe that's the best way of uniting her party. So it'll be interesting to see if Theresa May comes around to that position, because she's consistently said that no deal would be better than a bad deal. And a lot of people have thought that was just a sort of slogan. But a lot of people, a lot of MPs, a lot of members of Parliament, lawmakers in her party have always subscribed to that line. So it'll be interesting to see if that is something that, if she can't get anything from the European Union, she now then goes towards a sort of managed no deal situation.
You mentioned there MPs had last night rejected an amendment that would have given them a bit more control over the process and given them an opportunity to reject no deal. They could still do that, couldn't they?
Yeah, it's possible in a couple of weeks' time, if Theresa May doesn't get anything back from the European Union, that those MPs could have another go at trying to take control of the process. They were very reluctant to last night. They still want to give Theresa May the space to try and create an agreement that the Conservative Party can unite around. But if she fails to get any sort of meaningful legal change to the Irish situation, then we could be coming back here and she'll be asked the same question again by those people. Should she still be in power to do that? She managed to weather that storm last night, but things might change in a couple of weeks, because what the most important thing is the clock still keeps ticking to no deal at the end of March. And as time gets tighter and tighter, MPs might revisit this idea of Theresa May having control.
Well, revisiting things is something that's been happening quite often over the past few weeks, and I think we were likely to be revisiting Brexit again from this spot, Alan and I talking to you sometime in the future. This vote is going to come back again in the next 2 weeks, with Theresa May returning to Parliament with whatever agreement she manages to reach with the European Union.